They say you can't choose your family, but you can choose who sends the mortgage statement. Mine came in a plain envelope, the kind that looks like junk mail until you read the return address. I sat at the kitchen table peeling a clementine for my sons Carter and Levi while they argued over whose dinosaur was faster. When I slit the envelope open, the scent of citrus clung to my fingers. And there it was. The monthly escrow adjustment. For a property I didn't live in. For the house I grew up in. I glanced at the boys, still in their after-school chaos, and slid the papers back into the envelope before they could ask questions. I didn't want to talk about it. Not yet. Not about the house. Not about why I owned it. Not about why I never told anyone. 2 years ago, I bought the place in a foreclosure sale. Quietly. Through an LLC. The same home where my mother wallpapered every room with pastel florals, where my father lined up his steel-toed boots by the back door like trophies. The house they raised me in. The house they now rented month to month. They didn't know I was the one collecting their rent. That I was the name behind Merrow Properties LLC. That the signature on their lease renewal was mine. I hadn't planned to use it against them. That wasn't the point. Back then, I had just wanted a backup plan, a safe net, a way to never be cornered again. But safety isn't just about where you sleep. It's about who can walk into your life uninvited and what power you have when they do. My phone buzzed. Text from Mom. Renee's loan payments past due again. Just $1,800 this time. We know you've got it. She's drowning Fallon. Right. Drowning in imported espresso and retail therapy. I didn't answer. Another buzz. This time from Dad. Do the right thing. You're her sister. You've always helped before. I stared at that message a little longer. Not because I didn't expect it, but because of the way it weaponized memory. You've always helped before. As if kindness meant consent. As if I had signed a lifelong contract I couldn't read when I was 10. My jaw tightened. I deleted the messages. When I finally spoke that night, it was after the boys had gone to bed. Their little faces soft with sleep, the plush dinosaur tucked between them like a peace treaty. I stood by the sink staring out at the porch, light flickering on the neighbor's lawn, and whispered to myself, no more. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, out of clarity. The thing no one tells you about growing up in a dysfunctional family is that it takes you decades to realize the dysfunction wasn't normal, that love shouldn't cost that much, that help isn't supposed to feel like a trap. They had used every play in the book. Easier, I put myself through med school while waitressing overnight shifts. I brought twin boys into the world and raised them alone after my husband left, halfway through my pregnancy. I built everything I have with calloused hands and sleepless nights. And now they wanted me to clean up Renee's $80,000 disaster because she had maxed out her 4th credit card on French candles and a failed boutique. I opened the filing cabinet, pulled out the deed. There it was, my signature, the closing date, the LLC, the contract that made me the landlord of their lives, even if they didn't know it yet. I hadn't meant for it to come to this, but something was shifting. My boys were old enough now to remember, to absorb what they saw, and I wouldn't let them grow up thinking this was love. I pulled out a yellow sticky note and wrote 5 words in block letters. They have no idea. Yet. I folded it in half and stuck it inside the mortgage folder. Whatever came next, I wasn't scared. I wasn't silent. I wasn't theirs to control anymore. The next morning, I woke to 3 missed calls and a voicemail from my mother that began with, I'm not trying to start anything, and ended with, you know what your sister's going through. The kind of message meant to wrap guilt in softness like barbed wire under a silk scarf. I didn't need to listen to the rest. I already knew what it was about. Renee. Again. I scrolled down and saw a text from Dad, shorter and more direct. You need to step up. This is family. And finally, the one from Renee herself, time-stamped 2:13 a.m. Fallon. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. I'm late on the loan. Again. They said they'll sue. I stared at that one a little longer. Not because I believed her, but because I knew somehow the damage was already mine to hold. The boutique had opened 18 months ago in a gentrified stretch of downtown Asheville. Wild Rose, she'd called it. A half-baked blend of eucalyptus candles, bamboo racks, and overpriced imported scarves. Renee had pitched it over wine at Thanksgiving using words like passion project and curated lifestyle brand. I remember smiling politely, wondering where the money was coming from. Now, I knew. I clicked through my email archive and found it. An old message from a loan underwriter subject line signature confirmation request. I'd assumed it was spam at the time. It wasn't. She'd forged my signature. Co-signed an $80,000 small business loan using my name, my credit, my address. I should have screamed. I should have lawyered up, but I didn't, because by the time I found out the store was already open, the ribbon had been cut. The smiling photo of her and Mom had made it to Facebook with the caption, "Dreams do come true," and mine were collateral damage. I called the bank and froze the account. That much I could do. But legally untangling what she'd done would mean pressing charges, taking it public, making it real. Instead, I buried it, paid off just enough to stop the interest from snowballing, quietly took control of the debt, let her pretend she was managing it while I dealt with the bleeding behind the curtain. Until now. Renee had always had a talent for spinning glass from air. Growing up, she played the role of baby sister so well it might as well have been scripted. Cute, fragile, a little lost. She was the one who cried when things got hard, who pouted her way out of consequences, who could sit cross-legged on the living room floor and still somehow get someone else to clean up the mess. I was the opposite. I was the one who paid the car note when hers got repossessed in Phoenix. The one who wired tuition money when she dropped out of cosmetology school 6 weeks before finals, then decided to go to esthetician school across the state. The one who covered 3 months' rent in Chicago because she had a bad roommate and her boss didn't understand her worth. My parents never questioned it, never asked why I was the one always fixing. They said I was blessed to be in a better position, that helping her was the least I could do. Every time I said yes, I died a little more inside, and every time I stayed silent, she grew more certain that she could live without consequences. Until now. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and stared out the window as the sun broke across the lawn. The twins were still asleep, their backpacks half-zipped math worksheets peeking out like half-written promises. I thought of what it would cost them, what it had already cost them for me to keep playing this role. No more. I picked up my phone and typed one message to Renee. "I'm not your cosigner. I'm not your fixer. Handle your loan on your own." I stared at the words before hitting send. Then I added one more line. "Do not contact me again about money." It buzzed back immediately. "Wow. After everything, you're heartless. Mom was right. You think you're better than us." I didn't respond. Not because it didn't hurt. It did, but not in the way it used to. This time, the pain felt clean. Like the ache of pulling glass from a wound that had been festering for years. I wasn't angry, I wasn't bitter, I was just done. And when you've carried someone else's weight long enough, letting go doesn't feel like cruelty. It feels like breathing. The boys were quiet on the drive to my parents' house, which wasn't unusual. Sundays had always come with a strange stillness, a kind of anticipatory silence that clung to the air like humidity. I used to call it Sunday stomach as a kid, like something sat heavy in your gut and wouldn't move until Monday morning. Carter fiddled with the zipper on his hoodie. Levi stared out the window, counting cows like he used to when he was smaller. I wanted to turn around, take them to the park instead, or anywhere else. But habit is a stubborn thing, and so is guilt. The house sat at the end of a gravel drive the same way it always had, white siding, chipped porch rail, a wind chime that hadn't made a sound in years. It didn't look like a place where damage was done, but it was. Beau was already on the porch, nursing a glass of sweet tea and watching us pull up like he'd been waiting for a reason not to like what he saw. "You're late," he muttered before I could even say hello. "We're 10 minutes early," I said, guiding the boys up the steps. "Nice to see you too." Inside the house smelled like roast beef and overcooked green beans. My mother was in the kitchen apron on hair sprayed within an inch of its life. Janice Merritt had always prided herself on doing things properly, set tables, clean edges, prayers before meals, but it was never about comfort. It was about control. She glanced up from the oven. "You didn't bring a side?" she asked. I blinked. "No, I wasn't asked to. Well, she said with a shrug that barely hid her irritation, we always bring something. I brought your grandsons, I said, my voice flat. She waved it off and turned back to her baking dish. Renee arrived 20 minutes later, just as we were being called to the table. She swept in like she'd walked off a magazine cover, oversized sunglasses, full lashes, hair curled into beachy waves. I had to stop myself from laughing. She looked like she was here for brunch in Malibu, not Sunday supper in rural North Carolina. Oh my God, she said, flinging her arms open toward Mom. I almost didn't make it. The vibe today has been so heavy, like astrologically total chaos. Janice hugged her like she'd just returned from war. You poor thing. Sit down, sweetheart. You look pale. Fallon, move over. I didn't move. The boys sat on either side of me, shoulders brushing mine like anchors. I poured them each a glass of tea, handed them their napkins. Carter whispered, Can we go after dessert? I nodded. Dinner started with grace. Dad's voice was low and gravelly as he muttered the same prayer he'd said every Sunday of my life. Halfway through, I caught his eye. He didn't blink. The first 20 minutes were textbook. Mom asking Renee how she was sleeping. Renee saying her adrenals were shot. Dad nodding like he understood what that meant. No one asked about my boys. No one asked about me. I thought maybe we'd make it through the meal. Maybe the storm would pass, but storms don't pass when they're scheduled. Mom set down her fork and reached for her water glass. Fallon, she said lightly, we were hoping you'd come with a better attitude today. I didn't answer. You know what I mean? She continued, her tone saccharine. This business with the loan, it's gotten completely out of hand. Renee's being harassed. She's emotionally raw. She's always emotionally raw. I said, not raising my voice. Bo put down his knife. Put down his loudly. Mom smiled, but there was no warmth in it. All we're asking is that you pay off the loan, or at least help. $80,000 isn't that much to someone in your position. My hands were folded in my lap. Carter looked at me. Levi had stopped chewing. Actually, I said quietly, it's not about the money, it's about the principle and the pattern and the fact that I'm done cleaning up for her. Renee gave a breathy laugh. You always act like you're some martyr. You chose to help before. And I'm choosing not to now, I said. That's how boundaries work. Janice's voice rose. You ungrateful little girl. After everything we've done for you. You mean the constant guilt trips? The silence every time I needed help? The co-signed loans I never signed? She stood furious. You will pay your sister's debt or leave this house. And just like that, the boys froze. I stood slowly. Then I guess we're leaving. Bo moved fast. I didn't see his hand until it landed. The crack echoed off the dining room walls. My face snapped sideways. I stumbled back, hitting the china cabinet. My cheek burned. My lips split. I tasted blood. The boys gasped. Carter half stood, eyes wide. Levi reached for my hand. Bo stood over me, eyes cold. You deserved that. I wiped the blood from my lip and looked him in the eye. Not afraid, not even surprised. I hope you enjoyed dinner, I said, because it was your last in this house. I didn't explain what I meant. I didn't need to. I walked out with my boys holding their hands so tight my knuckles ached. And in my chest, where the hurt used to live, something else had started to take its place. Fire. I didn't cry. Not in the car. Not when I saw my reflection in the rearview mirror, lip still bleeding and cheek already blooming dark red. Not when Levi held my hand the whole way home like he was trying to keep me from floating away. We didn't play music. We didn't talk. The boys stared out the window as the countryside blurred past, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the engine and the occasional sniffle from Carter. When we got home, I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and left my shoes by the mat like it was any other night. Routine, I'd learned, could anchor the body while the soul tried to catch up. The boys went straight to their room without asking for TV time or a snack. They didn't even fight over which bed to take, something they usually did like clockwork. Carter curled up under his dinosaur comforter. Levi grabbed his sketch pad and began to draw with short, frantic strokes. I moved through the kitchen on autopilot. Ice pack, ibuprofen, wet cloth. I sat on the floor by the sink legs, stretched out back against the cabinet. The tile was cold, solid, real. I pressed the cloth gently to my mouth and closed my eyes. I had been hit before once. A man I dated in med school. Just once, just enough. He'd apologized with flowers and guilt. I left the next day and never told anyone. But this wasn't a partner in the heat of a fight. This was my father, my son's grandfather, in front of them, and it wasn't a mistake, it was punishment. I didn't realize I was shaking until I heard small feet pad down the hallway. Carter appeared in the doorway, barefoot, eyes wide and shining in the dim light. "Are we in trouble?" he whispered. I dropped the cloth. My hands still trembled, but my voice didn't. "No, baby." He crawled into my lap, curled against my chest the way he hadn't done in years. I kissed the top of his head, then his forehead. "We're going to be okay," I said softly. "Better than okay." He didn't answer, but his shoulders relaxed. I held him until his breathing deepened, then carried him back to bed, tucking both boys in as gently as I could. When I turned off the light, Levi reached out in the dark and caught my hand for just a second. The moment passed like a silent promise. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping lukewarm tea and staring at nothing. At some point, I opened my laptop, pulled up the deed file for the LLC, and stared at my name again. Fallon Merritt, owner? I'd been saving that document like a break glass in case of emergency switch. But tonight didn't feel like an emergency. It felt like a reckoning. They always told me family was blood, that loyalty came first, that you didn't turn your back on people no matter what. But they never explained what to do when they turned their backs first. When love came with strings and bruises and invoices. I clicked open the property manager's contact file. My fingers hovered over the keys, but I didn't message her. Not yet. I wanted to move with intention. No heat, no noise, just clean lines and quiet resolve. They would expect a fight. They'd expect yelling, accusations, emotion, but I was done giving them anything they expected. At sunrise, I changed the ice pack, brushed my teeth, and tied my hair into a low bun. The swelling on my cheek had started to fade into a deep purple line that ran like a shadow under my eye. It looked like war paint. And maybe it was. I woke the boys gently. We ate waffles and silent syrup sticky between our fingers. Levi showed me his drawing 3 dinosaurs standing between a small house and a large volcano. "The big one doesn't explode," he said, tapping the paper. "The others keep it away." I didn't ask which dinosaur was me. When I dropped them off at school, Carter turned before closing the car door. "Are we going back there?" "No," I said. "We're not." He nodded once, as if he already knew. By the time I pulled into the hospital parking lot, the plan had formed. Not revenge, not spite, just a boundary reinforced in stone, the kind you don't cross without consequences. I had always hoped it wouldn't come to this. But sometimes you don't get to hope. Sometimes you just get to choose. And I was finally ready to choose myself. The day I bought the house, I didn't tell a soul. Not my best friend, not my lawyer, not even the boys. It had been listed as a quiet foreclosure, one of those hush-hush filings where the bank didn't want to advertise what a mess it had become. I saw the listing by accident while scrolling late one night through property auctions in the area. There it was, 132 Greystone Road, my childhood home. It stopped me cold. The listing was dry square footage, roof age, needs minor cosmetic repair, but I could still see the floorboards. My dad stained himself the summer I turned 9. The corner of the kitchen wall where Renee threw a bowl of spaghetti during a tantrum, the bedroom I painted yellow without permission because I couldn't take another day of rose wallpaper. I hadn't set foot in that house in years, but I remembered every inch, and in that moment, I didn't buy it for nostalgia. I bought it for protection. I didn't qualify alone. Not on a single mother's salary, even with my physician's paycheck. But I had someone in mind. A man named Ellis Pike, a quiet, sharp-eyed investor I had stitched up in the ER 2 years prior after a late-night bar fight left him with a split brow and a dislocated thumb. He didn't want police involved, just a clean fix and silence. He got both. And when he asked what he could offer in return, I'd said, "Nothing now, but I'll keep your number." I emailed him at 2 a.m. The subject line was simple. "You said to call when I needed something." He replied within 10 minutes. If the math works, I'm in. I trust your instinct more than most brokers I've paid to disappoint me. The next morning, the LLC paperwork was drafted. I named it Farrow and Slate Holdings, a reference to the creek behind the house and the color of the tile in our old kitchen. The property manager never knew the buyer's name. Neither did my parents. The sale went through in less than 30 days, and just like that, they became my tenants. It had been a clean system. My parents received official communication through the management firm I'd contracted, generic forms, digital rent portal monthly invoices. They assumed it was some faceless company. They even complained about it at Thanksgiving that year. The new landlords, stricter my father, had grumbled, pouring gravy over stuffing. Can't even be a day late without a damn email. I smiled into my wine glass and said nothing. They paid on time for a while. But I'd noticed the pattern lately. Slower payments, gaps in deposit dates. I hadn't acted because I didn't want to. Part of me had hoped it would never come to this, that I wouldn't need this card. But after Sunday night, I knew better. I made the call from the hospital parking garage just after morning rounds. The signal cut out twice, but eventually I heard the manager's voice, Deborah Klein. She'd handled the property quietly and professionally from the start. Hey, Deborah, it's Fallon Merritt, Farrow and Slate. Dr. Merritt, good to hear from you, she said. Everything okay with the property? I just have a quick question. Are they current on rent? Pause. She clicked keys. Last payment was 3 months ago. We sent a warning letter last cycle. Next step would be formal notice. No, I said quickly. Don't send anything yet. I'll handle it from here. Understood. Want me to transfer the full file back to your account access? Yes. Today. My voice was calm, unshaken. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the wall for a long minute before pulling out my phone again. In my notes app, I had a draft from months ago, eviction notice, 30 days to vacate. I'd written it after Renee's third default, then never used it. I read it through, now editing as needed. The address was correct. The dates lined up. The LLC name was at the bottom signature line, blank. I didn't sign it yet. Not because I was uncertain, but because I wanted to do this precisely. No emotion, no mess, just truth. Documented. When I picked the boys up that afternoon, the sun was out again. Levi was clutching a clay turtle he made in art class. Carter had a paper badge from Classroom Safety Monitor. They talked over each other the whole ride home, arguing about whether turtles could be superheroes. I nodded along, smiled at their voices, but my mind was elsewhere, filing things, preparing, lining up the pieces. By the time we got home, the eviction file was waiting in my inbox. I opened it, read every line, and placed it neatly into a folder labeled Endgame. They had no idea what I already owned, and soon they'd learn what I was willing to do with it. I took the photos in the bathroom mirror before the swelling could fade. The bruise had turned a deep blue-black beneath my eye, the kind that would look worse before it looked better. My lip was split in the corner, still tender. I tilted my chin slightly, took one more shot with the overhead light casting down. No angles, no filters, just evidence. The phone camera clicked softly. Clinical. I'd taken trauma photos for work before documenting domestic abuse for women who couldn't speak it aloud, who needed someone else to frame their pain. Now, I was doing it for myself. After the boys were dropped off at school, I changed out of my scrubs and into a pressed black blouse. Hair pulled back, bruises exposed. I didn't want to hide anything. I wanted the system to see it all. The courthouse was quiet when I arrived. A Tuesday morning lull, mostly traffic tickets and custody hearings. The clerk handed me a clipboard without looking up. I filled in the blanks with steady hands. Name, Dr. Fallon Merritt. Respondents, Bo Merritt. Janice Merritt. Reason for order physical assault. Witnessed by minors. Ongoing coercion threats. The woman behind the plexiglass read it twice, then glanced up at me. Her mouth tightened. Step into courtroom 3, she said. They're calling emergency hearings today. The hearing took less than 10 minutes. The judge, a gray-haired woman with tired eyes and a direct tone, looked over my photos. My statement, the incident report I'd filed that morning with the sheriff's department. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. She didn't need to. Were the children present during the incident? Yes, Your Honor. Have you had previous physical confrontations with the respondents? Not like this. Not in front of my children. She nodded once. Order granted. Temporary protection for you and your children. Effective immediately. As I signed the final document, the court officer, standing nearby, asked quietly, "Can I ask what triggered all this?" I looked at him. Young, kind eyes, maybe a father, maybe not. "They hit me in front of my kids," I said, "because I wouldn't pay my sister's $80,000 debt." He blinked once. "You did the right thing," he said. "Let us handle the rest." I drove straight to the post office, had the notice certified return receipt requested. It was addressed to the house on Greystone Road, the house they still believed belonged to someone else. Then, for good measure, I made a copy and delivered it myself. I didn't knock. I didn't park in the driveway. I left the envelope in the mailbox and drove off before anyone could come to the window. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry. I felt still, like something had finally settled into place. Later that night, after the boys had gone to sleep and the house was quiet, I made tea and opened my laptop. I clicked on the folder labeled Endgame, then opened the eviction notice I'd revised the day before. I read every word again twice, checked the dates, reviewed the legal language. Then, slowly, I signed it. Fallon Merritt, Managing Member. Farrow and Slate Holdings, LLC. I attached the protective order just as backup, a line drawn twice in case the first one was ignored. The next morning the letter went out. 3 days later, they would receive it. And nothing would ever be the same. I didn't tell anyone. Not a friend, not my boss, not the counselor I saw once a month and always told I was doing fine. This wasn't a thing I needed to process. It was a thing I needed to do. The morning the notice was delivered, I walked into work like I always did, coffee and hand pager on my hip. I stitched up a boy who'd fallen off his skateboard. Helped deliver a baby whose mother cried through the epidural. I did my job. I breathed. I healed. At lunch, I sat in the break room scrolling through patient charts, pretending not to think about what was happening back on Greystone Road. At exactly 4:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Mom, how could you do this, Dad? You think you've won something. This is your legacy you're burning. Renee, guess you're the villain now. Hope it was worth it." I muted the thread. I didn't respond. Instead, I looked out the hospital window down at the traffic passing by. I saw a father holding his daughter's hand at the crosswalk, her pink backpack bouncing behind her. That's what it was always about. What the boys saw, what they learned, and what they'd never have to unlearn. Not on my watch. I waited until the boys were asleep, not just quiet, but fully undercurled into opposite sides of their shared bed like halves of a heart. Carter, with his flashlight still on, under the blanket, a comic book folded over his chest. Levi, with one arm slung across his sketch pad, like even in sleep he needed to hold on to something he made. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table, the kind of silence around me that feels less like peace and more like a held breath. The folder labeled Endgame lay open beside my laptop. The eviction template blinked on the screen, blank fields waiting to be filled. I entered the address first. Greystone Road, my childhood home, the only one I'd ever known before leaving for college and never really going back. Then the names, Bo and Janice Merritt, listed simply as tenants of record. And finally, you are hereby given notice to vacate the premises within 30 days of the date of receipt of this letter. Failure to comply will result in formal legal proceedings. No emotion, no explanation. Just language that made it clear this was not a conversation. Where it asked for a signature, I didn't write Fallon Merritt. I wrote Farrow and Slate Holdings, LLC Managing Member, detached. Clean, powerful. Exactly how it needed to be. The next morning, I forwarded the document to Clay Marine, my lawyer of 6 years. Calm, methodical, unshakable. He handled contracts, rental disputes, and the occasional mess Renee left behind before I stopped letting her sign anything with my name on it. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Clay just reviewed the eviction notice. Ironclad, dates match. Property tax records are current. They're 3 months delinquent, which is more than enough cause. If they contest it, they'll lose. I replied, "Good, mail it." Certified, tracked, full documentation. You want to sign personally or keep it under the LLC, keep it clean. No emotion, no names. 3 days later, the letter arrived. I knew it had landed because the silence broke all at once. At 9:42 a.m., my phone rang. Mom lit up the screen. I let it go to voicemail. At 9:43, another call. Then a text. Fallon. You can't do this. I didn't respond. At 10:17, Dad called. You've lost your mind. You think money makes you powerful. That house was never yours. It's not about paper. It's about legacy. At 10:21, Mom, again. Your sons will know what kind of woman you are. What kind of daughter. At 10:26, I texted back I already did. Nothing else. No punctuation. Just the fact of it. Around noon, Clay called. They left a voicemail at the office. Of course they did, I said. You want to hear it? No, I said. I know the script. He paused. Do you want me to respond on your behalf? No. Let them scream into the wind. I'm done being the echo. By evening, the calls stopped. I knew better than to assume that meant peace. With my parents, silence never meant surrender. It meant plotting. The guilt campaign would begin next. The cousins, the church women, the older aunt from Tennessee who only ever called to say, family is all we've got. They'd paint me as ungrateful, cold, cruel, selfish, and I wouldn't defend myself because I didn't need to. Let them spin their stories. I had the deed. The boys didn't know the details, only that we were going to move soon. I framed it, gently. We're getting a place of our own, I said. Closer to your school, with a yard. Will it have a porch? Carter asked. Yes. Will we be safe there? Levi asked, quieter. Yes, I said and meant it. That night, while they brushed their teeth, I sat on the edge of my bed and reread the lease agreement I'd drafted 2 years ago, the one my parents signed without ever checking who controlled it. They thought they were too proud to be tenants, too entitled to be questioned. But even pride needs somewhere to sleep at night, and they were about to lose theirs. At 7:12 p.m., I got one last message from Mom. No greeting, no context. Just, don't forget who made you. I looked at it for a long time before deleting it, because the truth was, they didn't. I did. Piece by piece, hour by hour, on no sleep in scrubs with a newborn in each arm with student debt and fear and no net beneath me. I made myself. I rebuilt myself every time they tore me down. And now I was building something new. Not for them, for us. I wasn't even supposed to be there. We usually did groceries on Sundays, but Levi had burned through cereal faster than usual, and Carter had a sudden craving for the fancy kind of apples, which meant Honeycrisps, the ones Whole Foods charged, like they were made of gold. I figured a quick stop after work wouldn't hurt. In and out, no drama. I should have known better. I turned the corner near the beauty aisle, dodging a couple with a stroller when I saw her. Long chestnut waves, big sunglasses perched on top of her head, indoors, pushing a cart. Like she didn't know the world a single thing. Renee. She was holding a tiny jar of rosehip serum, flipping it over to check the ingredients like she understood them. Her nails were manicured in a pale, neutral shade, the kind that cost $50 and required tip. She saw me before I had a chance to back away. Her face hardened, but she didn't flinch. Well, she said loud enough for a passing employee to glance over. If it isn't the Ice Queen herself. I stood still, cart in hand, watching her drop the serum into her cart with dramatic flair. Renee, you know, she said, inching toward me, I've been trying to give you the benefit of the doubt, telling Mom you were probably just stressed, overworked. Maybe you didn't mean to go full betrayal mode. I haven't betrayed anyone, I said. I just stopped cleaning up after you. Her jaw twitched. That's not how family works. No, I said calmly, that's exactly how family works. Or it should. It should be a choice, not a leash. She huffed out a laugh. You're unbelievable. Cold. That's what you are. Cold and selfish. You're letting Mom and Dad go homeless over a technicality. They stopped being my home a long time ago, I said. And they're not homeless. They're being asked to face reality, one I've carried for years, so they wouldn't have to. Oh, so you're the martyr now, she snapped. The big sister with all the answers? You think you're better than us? No. I said, voice low. I think I've just finally stopped pretending I'm not. She blinked. Her mouth opened then closed again. For a moment, she looked caught. And then she snatched the serum back out of her cart, held it up like a weapon. You'll regret this, she said. I promise you. You don't treat blood like this and walk away clean. I stared at her, taking in the $100 serum, the cart filled with things she couldn't afford, the arrogance laced with desperation. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look around for an audience. I just said, not as much as you will. And I walked away, past the end caps with the organic snacks, past the floral display, out the automatic doors and into the dusk where my car sat waiting. I didn't look back. She wasn't worth the turn. The first call came from my cousin Meredith in Virginia. I hadn't spoken to her in nearly 3 years, but the moment I saw her name flash across my phone, I knew. There's a certain look to a call made out of obligation when someone dials not out of care, but out of curiosity dressed up as concern. I let it go to voicemail. She followed up with a text 30 minutes later. Hey, just wanted to check in. Heard some things. Are you okay? I didn't answer. An hour after that, my phone buzzed again, this time from Aunt Cheryl. My mother's older sister, the one who sends birthday cards with no return address and occasionally forwards chain prayer emails. She always speaks like she's talking through a hymnal. Sweetheart, your mama called me. She's in tears. Says you've changed. That something's wrong. Call me, please. This isn't you. I stared at that message longer than I should have. Not because it hurt, but because I could see the blueprint behind it the way my mother could script a narrative thread, her voice, through just enough trembling pause between syllables to sound like the victim. And I knew exactly what she'd told them. According to the whispers now echoing across 3 states, I was bitter, controlling, ungrateful, emotionally unstable. Some stories painted me as hysterical, hallucinating trauma that never happened. Others suggested I was drunk during the confrontation. One version claimed I was having a breakdown from all that pressure at work. Not one mentioned the bruise under my eye. Not one included the sound of my son's breath hitching when I hit the floor. They didn't need to. That's not how smear campaigns work. You don't have to lie directly. You just seed the doubt and let it bloom in the minds of people who were never there. A few days later, my older cousin Jake texted, Mom's been asking questions. You okay? I replied simply, yes. He responded, you don't want to clear the air, no. There was no air to clear, just smoke they were trying to blow into rooms I'd already left behind. The hardest part wasn't the accusations. It was how easy it was to see it coming. My whole life had been priming me for this moment when I'd finally say no and they'd call it betrayal. When I'd finally pull back and they'd paint it as abandonment. They'd always preferred the version of me that stayed quiet, nodded politely, and said, of course. This version, the one with boundaries, they didn't know what to do with her. Levi found one of the letters on the counter, a handwritten envelope from Aunt Cheryl. He held it up like it was something fragile. Is it a birthday card? No, I said, taking it gently from his hand. Just something for grown-ups. I slid it into a drawer unopened. I wouldn't read it. I didn't need to, because the truth didn't require validation, not anymore. I didn't defend myself. I didn't call anyone back. I didn't post vague quotes on Facebook or send rebuttal emails. I didn't speak into the noise they were making because that's what they wanted. They wanted me tangled in it, explaining, apologizing, softening my stance so everyone could breathe easier. But silence has a weight of its own, and mine said everything it needed to. That weekend, I took Carter and Levi to the farmer's market. We bought sunflowers and local honey and a tiny jar of lavender-scented lip balm Levi insisted I needed. We didn't talk about family. We talked about the house we'd move into, about what color their room should be, about whether turtles would make good pets. At one point, Carter looked up at me and said, you seem lighter. I smiled. That's because I am. They could say whatever they wanted, but I had the lease. I had the order. I had my son's trust, and the deed in my name, and a quiet house with a fence we hadn't even built yet. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to explain why I wasn't going back. The house was smaller than I expected. Not in a disappointing way, more like it had been folded up neatly by someone who understood the value of space and quiet. A pale blue single story with white shutters and a porch swing that creaked softly in the breeze. The front yard was nothing extravagant, but a modest wooden fence framed it like a held breath. And along the walkway, just beneath the windows, rows of lavender bushes waited. Their scent caught the air even before I opened the gate. I stood on the porch for a moment before knocking. Old habit, I always knock, even when I'm expected. The realtor, a kind woman named May Tran with soft eyes and a no-nonsense handshake, answered with a grin. "You're early," she said. "I'm ready." We stepped inside and I let the door close behind me. The hardwood floors had been recently refinished. The kitchen was sunlit and simple, no marble, no polished chrome, just clean cabinets and room for a table that didn't have to seat extended family I'd stopped inviting. The bedrooms were small but manageable, and the backyard had a tree just the right size for a rope swing. I didn't say much during the walkthrough. I'd already made up my mind weeks ago. This was just formality. May set the folder on the counter and handed me the pen. "You're sure? I've never been more sure." And then I signed. It didn't feel like a moment worth fanfare. It felt like a door clicking shut behind me. Quiet, final. I didn't tell the boys right away. Not because I didn't want them to know, but because I needed the keys in my hand before I let myself believe it. I've learned not to celebrate things too early. That was something my parents taught me in their own roundabout way. Hope is dangerous unless it's paid for. So, I waited. I spent the afternoon walking through the empty house, opening cabinets, running my hand along the windowsills. I pictured where the boys' beds would go, which wall would get covered in drawings. I imagined a kitchen drawer full of their school papers, half-finished math sheets, and crayon portraits of dinosaurs and spaceships. I didn't picture guests. I didn't picture my parents. For the first time, the vision was just us. I took a picture of the front porch before I left. The lavender bushes swayed like they knew we were coming. At 3:05, I parked outside the school, same spot I always did. Levi spotted me first. He waved with both hands, his backpack bouncing as he ran. Carter followed more composed, but I could see the quick flick of curiosity in his eyes. I hadn't said anything unusual that morning, but they sensed something. They always did. "Where are we going?" Carter asked as he buckled his seatbelt. "I have something to show you," I said. Levi leaned forward from the back seat. "Is it a surprise?" I smiled. "It is." We drove in silence for a few minutes. When we turned onto the new street, Carter looked up. "This isn't the way home." "No," I said. "But it's the way to our home." I pulled up to the curb and parked. The house looked even softer in the afternoon light. Levi pressed his nose to the window. "It has a fence," he whispered. "It does." "And flowers," Carter added. I got out and walked around to their side, opened the doors. "Come on," I said. "Let's see it together." They followed me up the walkway, small hands gripping mine. At the porch, I reached into my coat pocket and held out the keys. "We're moving," I said. "This is ours." Carter's eyes widened. "Just ours," I nodded. "Yes, ours and only ours." Levi stared at the front door like it might speak. Carter turned toward me, brow furrowed. "No one else is coming. No one else is needed." And then, for the first time in what felt like forever, I watched my sons run through a doorway with joy instead of caution. They darted from room to room, calling dibs, opening closets, laughing. Levi lay on the living room floor and declared, "This is my thinking spot." Carter found a patch of sun in the corner and said, "This is where we eat pancakes on Saturdays." I stood in the kitchen, hand resting on the countertop, listening to their voices echo through our new walls. And in that moment, it hit me not like a wave, but like a quiet warmth settling into the bones. We weren't just moving into a house, we were stepping into our own story, one no one else got to write. It was day 30, the last hour of the last morning of the legal deadline, and I sat parked across the street from the house that used to be mine keys, cold in my lap, hands quiet on the wheel. The boys were silent beside me, one on each side like bookends holding the story in place. The house looked even smaller than I remembered, or maybe it had just shrunk under the weight of what had happened here. The lawn was a graveyard of trash bags, some ripped open trailing clothes like entrails. A broken dining chair was tipped over near the curb, its leg snapped and splintered. The box spring leaned against the porch like it had been thrown, not placed. That old patio swing my mother used to love hung askew, its once powder blue cushion now a torn, sun-bleached canvas. If homes carried the truth in their bones, this one had stopped pretending a long time ago. Kayla was already gone. I knew she would be. 2 days ago, a distant cousin I hadn't heard from in years texted your sister left. Miami. Said she needed to breathe again. No goodbye, no explanation, no accountability. Just another disappearing act wrapped in spa metaphors and self-pity. Her Venmo account had been wiped clean. Her voicemail was full. Typical. What caught me off guard wasn't the scene or her exit, but the unexpected stillness in me. Not relief, not anger, just stillness. Like I'd finally set something heavy down and realized I could walk straighter. You okay? Mom, Carter asked. I turned, catching his gaze in the rear view. His eyes were alert but steady. No panic there, just the kind of deep awareness kids develop when the adults in their life are unpredictable. Beside him, Levi hugged his knees to his chest, watching the house through the window. I am, I said quietly. You don't have to come with me if you don't want to. I can handle this part. I want to? Levi said without hesitation. Me too, Carter echoed. I nodded. Then we go together. We stepped out into the heat, the sun already pushing into late morning. The boys flanked me as we crossed the street, their small hands folded into mine. The air around the yard was thick, not just with summer, but with something heavier. History, decay, things left unsaid for too long. Bo was on the porch. His face looked more collapsed than I'd ever seen it. Not aged exactly, just collapsed inward like a man built on pride who had nothing left to prop it up. His shirt was soaked through with sweat, his arms crossed tight like he could squeeze back control. When he saw me, he stepped down a single stair. His eyes narrowed, voice like snapped wire. You think this makes you righteous? I said nothing. You think this proves something? You think buying a house makes you better than us? His voice grew louder. You're just a tenant who got lucky. A tenant with a bank account and a big mouth. Levi's fingers tightened in mine. Carter shifted closer. Bo took another step toward us. Don't come any closer. You're not welcome here. You're not in a position to say that anymore. I said level. This isn't your home. He stopped mid-step. His hand twitched. I saw it the split-second instinct to grab my arm to bark something louder to reclaim a power he no longer held. But I didn't flinch. Touch me again, I said, cold and sharp, and I'll see you in court. You know I mean it now. He froze. Not from fear. From realization. The rules had changed, and he wasn't the one who wrote them anymore. A voice called from inside. Bo, who is it, Janice? He didn't answer. Moments later, she emerged, dragging a cracked suitcase behind her. She wore oversized sunglasses, the kind she always thought made her look elegant. Now, they just looked like armor. When she saw me, she stopped short. Her mouth opened, but it took a few seconds for sound to come out. We're your family, she said, brittle and breathless. You're throwing us out like garbage. I looked her in the eye. I was garbage to you the day you watched him hit me in front of my sons. She flinched, and then she blinked hard like she could erase the memory if she did it fast enough. You don't mean this, she said, her voice shaking. You'll regret it. I exhaled. No. What I regret is not ending it sooner. A long silence dropped over the porch like a sheet. The boys were still beside me, still holding on, still bearing witness. But then, Levi stepped forward. Just one step. His voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. You lied, he said, looking at Janice. You told us love means sacrifice, Carter added, but you only wanted us to sacrifice for you, not the other way around. Janice's lips parted. No words came, no apology, no acceptance, just the flat echo of a woman used to having the last word and now unsure how to speak without it. Bo sat down hard on the porch swing. It creaked beneath him like it might split. His elbows rested on his knees, his head in his hands. I took one last look at the house that raised me, at the porch where I once learned how to disappear, at the people who mistook control for connection. Then I turned away. Let's go, I said. We walked back toward the car. 3 shadows stretched behind us, long and unbroken. The sun climbed higher, drying the sweat from my neck, lifting the weight from my shoulders. At the curb, I opened the back doors. Carter climbed in first. Levi paused. He glanced back, not with longing, but with something closer to curiosity. Then he asked, "Do you think they'll be okay?" I didn't lie to him. "I don't know," I said, "but we will be." He nodded, climbed in, and shut the door behind him. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine. And I didn't check the mirror, because some things don't deserve another glance, they deserve peace. And we were finally driving toward it. We were almost to the car when Levi stopped walking. It wasn't a stumble. It wasn't hesitation. It was a full-rooted stop, like a tree deciding not to bend. I felt the tug on my hand, soft but certain, and turned back. His eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on the porch. Janice had sunk onto the top step, her sunglasses shoved onto her head eyes, red-rimmed but dry. Her shoulders were hunched forward like someone used to, collapsing inward. Bo hadn't moved. Still anchored in that cracked porch swing, one hand gripping the armrest like it might steady the weight of what he refused to feel. Levi let go of my hand. "Baby," I whispered, unsure. But he took a step forward on his own. Not far, just enough so his voice would carry. Just enough to be heard. They both looked up. Janice blinked like she'd forgotten there were witnesses. Bo just stared unblinking. Levi was the quiet one, the cautious one, the kid who always folded his lunch napkin even when no one was watching. But now, his voice was clear and loud enough to cut through a decade's worth of silence. "You told us," he said, his words slow but steady, "that love means protection." The wind moved through the yard like it was holding its breath. It stirred the clutter at their feet, overturned boxes, a stained blanket, the leg of a broken chair. Janice pressed her hands together so tightly I could see the veins in her knuckles. "But you hurt our mom," Levi continued. "You let it happen." His voice didn't shake. It didn't rise in anger. He was just stating the truth, the kind that children don't usually say out loud because they assume no one will believe them. He took a breath. Then softer. "That's not love." For a long moment, nothing moved. Not the trees, not the air, not even my heart. It felt like time was suspended between syllables. Then Janice broke. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't the kind of crying that makes people look small and sympathetic. It was jagged, wrenching sobs, raw and guttural. She covered her face like a child. But still, she didn't say, "I'm sorry." Not to me. Not to Levi, not even to herself, because she didn't know how, or maybe she never thought she had to. I stepped beside my son and placed a hand on his shoulder. He didn't flinch or turn away, just leaned into me, quiet and solid, still watching her. "You lost your home," I said calmly, "because you never learned what family really means." It wasn't revenge, it wasn't even anger anymore, it was simply the truth. Bo still hadn't moved. His eyes were locked straight ahead as if he might hold his own story together by not acknowledging ours. He looked like a man made of cement, cracked gray and immovable. Janice sobbed harder now, trying to cry loud enough to drown out what Levi had already said. It was too late. I turned. Levi took my hand again, this time with certainty. Carter, who had watched the entire exchange in heavy silence, reached for the other. Together, we walked. I didn't look back. Because Ava's voice wasn't behind me. It wasn't in that house. It wasn't even mine. Ava was the grandmother who once held my hand when my mother left me crying on the stairs. Ava was the one who stayed up late telling me stories of women who didn't apologize for choosing peace. Ava was the one who always said family isn't who keeps you in line. It's who keeps you safe. And now Ava's voice lived in Levi's quiet bravery, in Carter's fierce stillness, in the way I no longer mistook control for care. We crossed the street, and with every step, the house behind us, the one that held our ghosts. Our guilt, our generational weight shrank in the rear view of memory. Not gone, but smaller, distant, contained. We didn't raise our voices. We didn't need to. Ava had spoken through us, and it was enough. That evening, the light outside turned golden slanting through the kitchen window like honey. The breeze rustled through the lavender bush along the fence, and for the first time in years, I heard nothing else. No shouting in the distance. No phone vibrating with guilt or obligation. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the clink of mugs on the counter. The kitchen was small. The paint was still fresh. The shelves were bare except for a few boxes of pasta and cereal. We hadn't even unpacked the mugs properly. I used a chipped one from the thrift store for my tea. Carter and Levi had tall plastic cups filled with apple juice. We sat around the little round table I found on Facebook Marketplace. I'd cleaned it with lemon oil that morning. It still smelled faintly like someone else's story, but I liked it. Stories could be rewritten. Carter was drawing something with a stub of a pencil on a napkin, probably a rocket. He was always sketching ships or machines, as if trying to build his own way out of anything that hurt. Levi was watching the lavender sway through the open window, his chin propped on his hands. Then he looked at me. "Do you feel better now, Mom?" he asked. I stirred my tea, watched the steam rise for a second before answering. "I feel clean," I said finally, "like the dirt is finally gone." He tilted his head. "Like a shower," I smiled. "Not exactly. Like when something bad has been sitting on you for so long you don't even know it's there, and then one day it lifts, and you realize you can breathe easier." Carter looked up. "Like when we left that old apartment with the mold." "Kind of like that," I said, laughing softly. The boys grinned. Then Carter went back to his sketch, and Levi went back to watching the lavender. We didn't say much more after that. There was no dramatic music, no fireworks, no final confrontation on the front lawn. Just a quiet moment in a plain kitchen with mismatched chairs, paper napkins, and the knowledge that peace doesn't always look like a celebration. Sometimes it looks like apple juice in a plastic cup. Sometimes it smells like lavender and lemon oil. Sometimes it's the feeling of knowing no one is coming to knock on your door with another demand. No one is going to raise their voice across the table. No one is going to make you choose between love and survival. I leaned back in my chair and watched the sun dip lower shadows softening along the tile. Levi yawned and leaned against my arm. I kissed the top of his head. Carter stood, stretched, then quietly began putting his drawing into a folder we'd labeled ideas. He was saving things now, planning, trusting the future would be safe enough to hold his dreams. "Bed soon," I said. They nodded. No argument. No pleading for more screen time, just calm. I sipped my tea again. It was still hot, still sweet, and it tasted like freedom. The message came just after lunch on a Tuesday. I was folding laundry on the couch watching Levi and Carter paint on old cardboard boxes out back. The sun was warm, the breeze smelled like cut grass and rosemary from the neighbor's yard, and for once time, didn't feel like a burden to carry it just past. My phone buzzed. A number I hadn't saved, but I recognized the area code. The text was short. "They're in a tiny apartment over a strip mall in Fairgrove." Renee stopped answering. "Janice is asking around for churches that give out grocery cards." I stared at it for a moment, read it again, then set the phone face down beside the laundry basket. I didn't reply. Because what was there to say? There were times in my life when I might have jumped into action, driven across town, shown up with bags of food, paid off someone else's overdue bill out of guilt or habit or that aching need to be the good one. But those times were over. I walked to the back door, pulled it open, and stepped out onto the deck. The boys looked up, faces streaked with paint smiles, easy and open. Carter had dipped half the brush handle into yellow before deciding it made a better spaceship antenna. Levi was carefully outlining a sun with navy blue, his tongue poking from the corner of his mouth in deep concentration. "Want to help us finish this one?" Mom, Carter asked, holding up a cardboard canvas splattered with orange swirls. I sat down on the grass beside them. "Only if I get the red," I said. They grinned and scooted over to make space. Levi handed me a brush, already dripping. Later that evening, after the paints had been rinsed and the brushes left out to dry, I posted the photo. The three of us, barefoot, a little messy, caught mid-laugh with the backyard glowing behind us. The cardboard paintings lined the fence like strange little flags. Carter had named one of them Safe Planet. The caption I typed was simple: "We don't live in fear anymore." I didn't tag anyone, didn't name anyone, didn't need to. There would always be pieces of what came before, bruises that healed uneven, voicemails I never listened to, childhood photos tucked in a drawer too deep to reach. But we were no longer trapped in the echo of old roles, no longer bending to guilt repackaged as tradition, no longer confusing loyalty with self-erasure. The house was small, but the rooms were filled with light. The fridge wasn't fancy, but it had food we'd picked out together. The nights were quiet. The boys slept without flinching at sounds in the hallway. And me, I dreamed now. Sometimes of mountains and lavender, sometimes of Ava's voice in the wind, but mostly I dreamed forward, not back. Because what remains after the house, after the letters, after the silence, is not the wreckage of the past. It's the life we chose to build in its place.